Hi, and welcome to Biztech's APAC Cybersecurity Show. Now, through the show, we update the region on the latest threats and incidences and help you to protect yourselves better. Now, joining the conversation to bring an expert lens to the show is my co-host, Benjamin Ang. He's the head of the Center of Excellence for National Security and Digital Impact Research at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Ben, as always, great to have you back on the show.
Brian, as always, glad to be here.
Now, Ben, for a start, we're going to zoom in first on Japan with a story with an article out of the Asahi Shimbun. Now, there have been a series of cyber attacks on the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the equivalent of NASA, in Japan, which resulted in a mass data leak of more than 10,000 files, which included classified material. Now, the attacks occurred last year around this time and multiple times in a year. Although investigations are ongoing regarding whether more information was stolen in this year's attacks. Now, in addition to internal data, potentially compromised entities included NASA, Toyota Motor Corp, Mitsubishi, and the Defense Ministry, all of which is JAXA, which is the organization, has non-disclosure agreements. Now, Ben, tell us more about this and why this is a concern.
Well, Brian, look at this list. NASA, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Defense Ministry of Japan. Which of these things are not like the other? Well, it's the automobile companies. Let's say you're an automobile company, you don't usually consider yourself a target of nation-state attacks. But yet, these two automobile companies now have their classified information, confidential data, taken as part of a big heist. And they could have been doing research on new materials because space research is very good for materials. I don't know what they're doing. Whatever it is, now they've got their trade secrets gone. But while that is bad, the second order risk that they've got personal data or corporate data that could have been stolen. So there might be personal data which could be used to send convincing phishing emails to the Toyota or Mitsubishi staff. Or there could be even credentials that allow somebody to get into the Toyota or Mitsubishi networks. And remember, even this might be a nation-state attack on JAXA. A lot of nation-states also are pally with cyber criminals, or they use cyber criminals to carry out their work.
So the other thing that, as we read this and you were talking, the scary thing came to mind was basically because of the automotive industry and how it is moving again to autonomous cars. And basically all our cars, especially now the new EVs, are basically really very electronically driven as opposed to previously mechanically driven. And then obviously makes the vehicles vulnerable to cyber attacks.
Oh, absolutely. And this has been shown in a number of different experiments that have been carried out, even as in the past 10 years. And there are ways to secure the cars. The most fundamental of it is to separate the communication systems from the systems that actually run the operation of the car. So those kind of standards need to be set by governments that are bringing in EVs. We are importing, if you're going to buy, there should be consumer standards that also cover this, because we've got consumer standards that require them to have seat belts as a safety measure, yes, and proper brakes. So the proper secure networks also have to be part of that standard.
Interesting. And that's something I think we need to explore further in another show. But moving on to a second story, which is then out of Indonesia. Now, President Jokowi basically ordered an audit of government data centers after officials said that the bulk of data affected in a recent ransomware attack last month was actually not backed up and exposed, therefore, the country's vulnerability to such attacks. Now, last month's cyber attack, which is the worst in Indonesia in recent years, disrupted multiple government agencies, including immigration and operations at major airports. Now, the government said that more than 230 public agencies, including ministries, had been affected, but had refused to pay an 8 million ransom demanded to retrieve the encrypted data. Now, Ben, what more do we know about this and what surprised you in this attack?
Well, Brian, first I have to say I have the greatest sympathy for all the victims involved, all the ministries, everybody who's going to get audited. Oh, hacks happen, cyber attacks, breaches, they happen to all of us. And this really shows that government ministries are not any safer. Um, and they also show us that cyber attacks don't just affect data, they can truly disrupt life because, if immigration and airport operations are affected, people's travel is disrupted. What surprised me is that there were no backups.
I know that was that for me, it was just an eye-rolling event. I said, oh my goodness, how did that happen?
So I think the moral of the story is backup, backup, backup. Now, the problem is that ransomware attackers have become even more savvy. So what they'll do is that some of them will get into your system and get into your backups to corrupt your backups. So you need to have
Oh
a
my
backup
goodness.
of your backup.
And so physically the backups should be separate as well as digitally
Yeah.
to
So you need to
isolate
have
the thing.
layers and layers and layers of this. And in some cases, they are not there to prevent you from getting access. If they have a copy of your data, it also means that they can now extort you. Because let's say, no, I'll just retrieve my backup. This, yeah, fine, but we're going to leak all your customer data onto the dark web. Then you're still sunk. So you can see ransomware is a big, big, big problem.
Okay, but there's a twist in this story. Now, Brain Cipher, which is the group responsible for hacking into Indonesia's temporary data center, national data center, and disrupting the country's services, later apologized for its action and released an encryption key to the government. And the apology read as follows: Citizens of Indonesia, we apologize for the fact that it affected everyone. The team wrote in a statement shared by Singapore based dark web intelligence outfit Stealth Mole. Wow, Ben, that's bizarre. What are your thoughts on that?
There's so many things. For one thing, first, they have claimed credit. Are they the ones who did it? Is another great question. But I will say that the Indonesian government took the right stand. Don't pay the ransom. Because in many cases, you can pay the ransom and get nothing back. And they are using taxpayers' money, right? So, that would be a real tragedy if you gave a ransom, you funded the operations of cyber criminals, and you don't get your data back. Then you'll lose twice. And so they did the right thing. But also, if you think about it from a cyber criminal point of view, what are you going to do if a government is not going to pay you? Are you going to lean on that government when basically they've got a police force and a military force, a very large military force? Shall we remember that Indonesia is huge? That
Yes.
if they decided to then apply the
Hunt you
weight of
down.
the entire country to go and find you, it probably won't be very good for your cyber criminal business. So it might be just a good idea to say, you know what, you don't paying well, here's everything back. Of course, the next thing is that they still have to see whether the decryption key actually works, because sometimes these keys don't work. But it might be, we don't know for sure, we'll never really know, but that this ransomware gang, if they are really truly responsible, might have decided it's not worth the risk of poking further into this government.
Now, finally, Ben, we're in the second half of the year. What are some of the key things that continue in the APAC region to be of concern to CISOs and CIOs?
Brian, I think it'll be no surprise after the conversation we've had today that ransomware is huge. And not only that, what is the way that most ransomware is coming in is through phishing emails. Because phishing emails are getting better and better and more convincing. And
why is that?
In the old days, we could tell people, oh, look out for the typos, look out for the spelling errors or grammatical mistakes or the clumsy language. The CEO of this company would never write to you in this way. Well, guess what? ChatGPT has solved that. So cyber criminals now have impeccable spelling, impeccable grammar, and they can mimic the language and tone of any CEO, including yours.
And that's scary. Now, on that note, Ben, that's it for this week's APAC Cybersecurity Show. Ben, it's been great having you on as a guest today.
Thank you, Brian. Always glad to be here.
Now, we've been speaking to Benjamin Ang, Head of Center of Excellence for National Security and Digital Impact Research at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. This has been Biztech's APAC Cybersecurity Show. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out the show on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.